at different versions of yourself, examining your defensiveness, cringing at your past self. None of this feels good in the moment. But comfort isn't the goal. Healing is the goal. Welcome to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. What's up, my friend? Welcome to episode 38 of the Kindness Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and I'm so fired up to dive into today's topic with you. So before we dive in, let me ask you something that might make you a little uncomfortable. When was the last time you were genuinely surprised by your behavior? I'm talking about one of those moments where you did or said something and then you thought, wait, where did that come from? If you're like most people, it probably happened more recently than you'd like to admit. Maybe you snapped at someone you love over something trivial, or maybe you found yourself defending an opinion that you're not even sure that you believe, or maybe you caught yourself being exactly like the person you swore you would never become. Here is the uncomfortable truth, my friend. Most of us, yeah, I'm gonna say most of us, walk through life on autopilot, completely unaware of why we do what we do, feel what we feel, or react the way we react. We think we know ourselves, but in reality, we're strangers living in our own bodies. Today, I'm talking about self-awareness, and I need you to understand something right from the jump. This isn't some self-help navel-gazing exercise. This is about kindness, real kindness, the kind that can heal relationships, transform communities, and yes, create a kinder world. Here's why self-awareness is absolutely critical to creating a kinder world that you desperately need. You cannot change what you're not aware of. You cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge, and you definitely cannot spread authentic kindness when you're disconnected from your own truth. For real, how many conflicts in your life have happened because someone lacked the self-awareness to recognize their own triggers, biases, or impact on others? How many relationships have been damaged by people who couldn't see their own patterns? How much unnecessary suffering exists because we humans are absolutely terrible at understanding ourselves? When we lack self-awareness, we become accidental weapons of emotional destruction. We hurt people without meaning to. We perpetuate cycles that we don't even see. We become the very problems that we claim that we want to solve. But when we develop genuine self-awareness, and I'm not talking about the performative, I'm so self-aware nonsense that people post on social media all the time, something magical happens. We stop projecting our unhealed wounds onto others. We take responsibility for our impact. We show up with authentic kindness instead of reactive defensiveness. So in today's episode, I'm going to share 3 uncommon strategies that will radically increase your self-awareness. And notice, I said uncommon. I'm not talking about the typical advice you've heard 1,000 times. These are strategies that will make you uncomfortable, challenge your self-perception, and will ultimately transform how you show up in the world. And as always, each section will include a practical takeaway that you can start using immediately, because self-awareness without action is just sophisticated self-delusion, and no one has time for that foolishness. So if you're ready, it's time to hold up a mirror that might show you things that you've been avoiding. But remember, the kindest thing that you can do for yourself and everyone around you is to see yourself clearly. Let's get to it. I want you to imagine something with me. You're at holiday dinner with your family and your mom asks you to pass the sweet potatoes. Now, imagine you're in a board meeting and your boss asks you to present your quarterly results. Finally, imagine you're out with college friends and someone brings up that legendary story from sophomore year. Here's my question, it's kind of deep. Are you the same person in all 3 scenarios? And before you automatically say, yes, of course I am, I need you to think about it, like really think about it. The truth is, most of us are shapeshifters. We have our work self, our family self, our old friend self, our stranger at the grocery store self, and about 17 other versions of yourself depending on the context. And look, some adaptation obviously is normal and healthy. You probably shouldn't talk to your grandmother the same way that we talk to your best friend after 3 margaritas. But here's where it gets interesting and where the self-awareness part comes in. The gaps between those versions of you, those gaps are telling you something profound about what parts of yourself you're suppressing, what parts you're amplifying, and most importantly, what version feels the most authentic. Let me share a personal story that I still reflect on very often, to this day actually. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at 2 different events in the same week. The first was a corporate leadership conference, you know the type. Everyone's rocking navy blue sport coats, super professional, lots of PowerPoint presentations, you know the deal. The second was a community activism gathering, passionate people, casual dress, lots of righteous anger about injustice. At the corporate event, I found myself being measured, diplomatic, careful with my words. I smiled politely, I used business jargon, and I definitely didn't mention anything that would be seen as too political or too emotional. But at the activism event, y'all, I was a completely different person. I was passionate. I was fired up. I let my emotions show. I talked about fighting against systemic issues. I even dropped a curse word or two. Okay, maybe like 3 or 4. On the drive home from that second event, though, I had this moment of clarity that hit me like a ton of bricks. Which one of those was the real Shola? Was I being fake at the corporate event? Was I being performative at the activism event? Was I somehow both and neither at the same time? That was a lot to think about. That's when I realized something that changed everything. The problem wasn't that I showed up differently in different spaces. The problem was that I wasn't conscious of it. I was code switching on autopilot without any intentional thought about why or what it was costing me. Here's what studying your character in different settings actually reveals. First, it shows where you feel safe to be yourself and where you don't. Where you're drastically different with certain people, that's data. Maybe those relationships need work, or maybe they need boundaries, or maybe they just need to end. Second, it reveals parts of yourself that you've labeled as unacceptable in certain contexts. Maybe you hide your humor at work because someone told you that you need to be more professional, or maybe you suppress your intelligence around certain family members because they made fun of you for using big words, or maybe you dial down your joy around certain friends because they're always complaining and you don't want to seem insensitive to their challenges. Third, and this is the big one, it shows you which version of yourself feels most aligned with your values. When do you feel most like yourself? When do you leave an interaction feeling energized versus drained? When do you feel proud of how you showed up versus feeling like you betrayed yourself? I started paying attention to this after the 2 event situation, and what I discovered was mind-blowing. The version of me that felt most authentic wasn't the corporate Shola or the activist Shola. It was this third version that I only seemed to access with a small group of trusted friends. With them, I was both professional and passionate, strategic and emotional, and both careful with my words and willing to be vulnerable. That's when I realized, why wasn't I being that version of myself everywhere? What was I so afraid of? So here's your first kindness strategy of the episode. Over the next week, I want you to become an anthropologist studying your own behavior. Create what I call a character journal. After each significant interaction, whether it's a work meeting, a family dinner, phone call with a friend, whatever, take 2 minutes to write down 1, how did I show up in that interaction? What energy did I bring? What parts of myself did I emphasize or hide? 2, what felt authentic and what felt like performance? And 3, on a scale of 1 to 10, how drained or energized do I feel after this interaction? Do this for 1 week, then look at the patterns. Where are the gaps? Where are you shape-shifting the most? And most importantly, what would happen if you start bringing more of your authentic self to the spaces where you've been hiding? Remember, self-awareness isn't about judgment, it's about information. You're not trying to shame yourself for adapting to different contexts. You're trying to understand the cost of those adaptations and make conscious choices about who you are and who you want to be in this world. All right, let's get uncomfortable for a minute. I want you to think about the last time someone disagreed with you about something that you really care about. Maybe it was politics, parenting, your favorite sports team, or whether pineapple belongs on pizza. It doesn't, by the way. Fight me. Okay, jokes aside, how did you respond? Did you immediately launch into defense mode, marshaling all your arguments ready to prove why you're right and they're wrong? Or did you lean in with curiosity, genuinely interested in understanding their perspective? Here's what most of us don't realize. The things we feel compelled to defend reveal our deepest insecurities and identity attachments, while the things we can explore openly show us where we're secure and growing. Let me tell you about a conversation that completely changed how I think about this. I was at a party recently and I mentioned that I'd recently stopped drinking alcohol. This woman across the table, we'll call her Janet, immediately started challenging me. Oh, so you think you're better than people who choose to unwind with a glass of wine? What about the science that proves that a glass of red wine is actually good for your health? For some reason, I went from 0 to defensive in about 0.3 seconds, and I started rattling off statistics about alcohol's effect on our sleep, our brain function, and even how it packs on unwanted weight. I was building my case like I was defending for a dissertation. My friend later told me that I actually started talking louder and faster, like I was in some sort of debate competition or something. But then when things kind of cooled down later on in the evening, Janet said something about my work. She questioned whether my approach to organizational kindness was too soft for the real corporate environments of the world. And you know what? I completely shifted. I got curious. I asked about her experience in corporate settings and I wanted to understand what made her think that. I even took notes on my phone because she actually raised some decent points. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the difference in my reactions. Why did I defend my choice not to drink alcohol like my life depended on it, but I could explore critiques about my life's work with curiosity? It was weird. But the answer was so humbling. I was still insecure about my choice to stop drinking alcohol. It was new to me, and deep down, if I'm gonna be real, I was worried that some people would think I was jumping on some trendy bandwagon or something. But my work? I've been doing this stuff for years, man. I've seen the results. I know the impact. I'm secure enough in that space to be curious rather than defensive. So here's the profound truth about defensiveness. We defend what we're not sure about. We defend what feels fragile in our identity. We defend what we're afraid might not be true. Think about it. If someone told you the sky was green, would you get defensive? Of course not. You'd probably laugh it off and wonder if they're okay. But you know the sky is blue. I mean, or gray if you live in Seattle, but you're secure in that knowledge, so there's nothing to defend. When someone challenges something that's tied to your identity, your parenting choices, your political beliefs, your career decisions, that defensiveness is like an alarm system going off telling you alert, alert, identity threat detected. This is where self-awareness comes absolutely crucial for kindness. Because when we're in defense mode, we cannot be kind. We cannot listen. We cannot connect. We can only fight. When we can recognize our defensiveness as information rather than truth, something beautiful happens. We can pause and ask ourselves, why am I defending this so hard? What am I afraid of? What would happen if I got curious instead? I've been practicing this a lot lately. Let me tell you, it's transformed my relationships and my ability to create meaningful dialogue, even in divisive situations. When I feel that defensive energy rising, I now see it as a flashing neon sign pointing to an area where I need to do some internal work. For example, I noticed I used to get super defensive when people question whether individual kindness could really change systemic problems. You know why? Because deep down, I sometimes wondered the same thing. I was defending against my own doubts. Once I realized this and recognized it, I could actually explore those doubts openly. I could have real conversations about the relationship between individual actions and real systemic change. And ironically, those explorations made my work stronger and more nuanced. So here's the second practical kindness strategy of the episode. For the next week, create what I call a defend versus explore tracker. Every time someone challenges your opinion or disagrees with you, notice your internal response and write it down. 1, what was the topic? 2, did I feel the urge to defend or explore? 3, if I defended, what was I afraid would happen if I didn't? And 4, if I explored, what allowed me to stay curious? At the end of the week, look for patterns. What topics consistently trigger your defense mechanisms? Those are your growth edges, the places where you have the most opportunity to develop genuine security and self-awareness. Then try this experiment. The next time you feel defensiveness rising, literally say out loud, "That's interesting. Tell me more about why you see it that way." Even if every fiber in your being wants to argue, just try it. You might be amazed at what happens when you choose curiosity over combat. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. All right, my friend, we're about to do something that's going to make you want to hide under a blanket and never come out. We're going to talk about examining your past self. And specifically, we're going to talk about the cringe. Yeah, I said it, the cringe. You know what I'm talking about. Those old photos where you thought you looked amazing at the time, but now you're like, what in the hell was I thinking? Those emails that you sent 5 years ago that make you wonder if you're having an out-of-body experience. Those Facebook posts, you know, the ones that pop up in your memories and make you immediately hit delete before anyone else sees them? Here's the thing, that cringe, that feeling, that's not just embarrassment, that's valuable data about your growth, current blind spots, and the ways you might still be overcompensating for past versions of yourself. Let me share a story that still makes me simultaneously laugh and want to crawl into a hole. A few years ago, I found an old external hard drive while cleaning out my office, and on it were videos of presentations I gave early in my career, maybe like 12 years ago. Man, I thought I was killing it in those presentations. I remember feeling so confident, so articulate, so impactful. I was excited to watch them and see young Shola in action. So I made it exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds of the first video before I had to shut it off. I just couldn't do it. It wasn't that the content was bad. My ideas were actually pretty solid, but oh my goodness, the delivery. The delivery. I was trying so hard to sound smart that I was basically incomprehensible. Every sentence had at least 3 words that nobody uses in regular conversation. I kept saying things like, leverage our synergies to actualize potential for transformative outcomes. What does that even mean? Here's where it gets interesting though. After I got over the initial cringe, I forced myself to watch the whole thing, and man, it was hard. And then I watched another one, and then I started seeing patterns. That version of me was desperately trying to prove he belonged in those rooms. He was overcompensating for being young, for being black in predominantly white spaces, and for not having an MBA like everyone else seemed to have. Every $5 word was a shield against my imposter syndrome. And then I did something that turned out to be even more powerful. I looked at more recent presentations, ones I gave like 3 or 4 years ago. You know what I found? I had swung the pendulum in completely the opposite direction. I was so focused on being accessible and relatable that I noticed I was dumbing down important concepts. I was so afraid of being that pretentious guy from the old videos that I was underselling my expertise. The past cringe had revealed not just how I'd grown, but even to this day, how I was still letting my past self drive my current behavior. This is the power of examining your past self cringe. It shows you 3 critical things. First, it reveals genuine growth. The fact that you can cringe at your past self means that you've evolved. You've developed new awareness, new skills, new perspectives. That's worth celebrating, even if the cringe is painful. Second, it shows patterns that you might still be stuck in. Maybe you cringe at how people-pleasing you were 5 years ago, but when you really examine your current behavior, you realize you're still doing it, but just in more subtle ways. Or maybe you cringe at how rigid you used to be, but now you've swung so far in the opposite direction that you can't maintain any boundaries. Third, and this is crucial for self-awareness, it reveals what you're most afraid of being seen as. The things that make us cringe the hardest are usually things that we're most desperately trying to distance ourselves from or hide from others. And that desperation, it can make us overcorrect in ways that create new blind spots. I have a friend who found her old high school diary, and she was mortified by how dramatic and emotional she was about everything. Every small incident was the worst thing ever, or the best day of my life. She cringed so hard that she said she wanted to burn her diary. But here's what she realized after sitting with the cringe. She becomes so afraid of being seen as dramatic or emotional that she completely shut down her ability to feel and express genuine emotion. Her partner had been telling her for years that she seemed distant and disconnected, and suddenly she understood why. She was still running from her teenage self. How sad is that? So the kindest thing that we can do for ourselves and for others is to integrate all versions of ourselves rather than trying to destroy evidence of who we used to be. That pretentious young Shola who used corporate buzzwords, he was doing his best with what he knew. He was trying to be taken seriously in a world that didn't often take him seriously. I can have compassion for that dude while still learning from him. So this is your third kind of strategy of the episode. This week, I want you to do a past self deep dive. Find something from at least 5 years ago, old emails, journal entries, social media posts, photos, videos, whatever you have. Spend 30 minutes reviewing this material. But here's the crucial part. Approach it with curiosity and compassion rather than judgment. As a review, ask yourself, 1, what was this version of me trying to achieve or protect? 2, what growth does my cringe reveal? 3, am I overcorrecting for anything that I see in my past self? And 4, what wisdom did my past self have that I might have lost? Then, if you're up for it, I've actually done this. It's a pretty cool exercise. Write a short letter to your past self. Thank them for your efforts. Acknowledge their struggles. Let them know what you've learned. And most importantly, identify one quality they had that you want to reclaim. Because sometimes in our rush to grow, we throw away things that were actually working. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate the cringe. It's to understand what it's teaching you about your journey and your current blind spots. We've covered 3 powerful strategies for developing the kind of self-awareness that can transform not just your life, but your capacity to create kindness in the world. 1, study your character in different settings to understand which parts of yourself you're suppressing or amplifying and which version feels the most authentic. 2, track what you defend versus what you explore to identify your insecurities and growth edges, choosing curiosity over combat. And 3, identify your past self cringe to recognize your growth, identify overcorrections, and integrate all versions of yourself with compassion. Here's what I need you to understand as we wrap this up. Self-awareness is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. When we lack awareness of our own patterns, our own triggers, and our blind spots, we become accidental sources of harm in the world. We perpetuate cycles we don't even see. We reject our unhealed wounds onto others. We mistake our personal preferences for universal truths. But When we develop genuine self-awareness, when we can see ourselves clearly with both honesty and compassion, we become capable of the kind of intentional kindness that actually changes things. You see, most of what passes for kindness in our world is actually just unconscious niceness. People operating on autopilot, following social scripts, avoiding real conflict. But real kindness, the kind that heals and transforms, that requires knowing yourself well enough to recognize when you're acting from your wounds versus from your wisdom. It requires seeing your impact on others clearly. It requires taking responsibility for the energy you bring into every single space. Self-awareness is how we stop being passengers in our own lives and start being intentional creators of the world we want to see. It's how we break generational patterns. It's how we stop hurting people without meaning to. It's how we become the kind of humans who can hold space for other struggles because we learn to hold space for our own. The work we discussed today isn't comfortable, fam. Looking at different versions of yourself, examining your defensiveness, cringing at your past self, none of this feels good in the moment. But comfort isn't the goal. Healing is the goal. Becoming someone who can create more kindness than harm in the world, that's the goal. And here's the beautiful thing. Every moment of self-awareness is a moment of choice. Once you see a pattern, you can choose whether to continue it. Once you recognize a trigger, you can choose how to respond. Once you understand your impact, you can choose to adjust it. This work is never done. I'm still discovering new blind spots, still catching myself in old patterns, still occasionally cringing at things I said or did last week, let alone 5 years ago. But that's not failure, that's the process. Every moment of awareness is a victory, even when what you're becoming aware of isn't pretty. At the end of the day, creating a kinder world isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware enough to recognize when we're adding to the world's suffering and brave enough to choose differently. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I have one favor to ask of you. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Bye for now.